Hello, and welcome to the Social Small Talk.
Hey everyone, this is Audra Brim, and I am so excited that you've joined me for this episode of the Social Small Talk. I'm the CEO and founder of Brim Media, and I have dedicated my professional life to helping the beauty industry navigate the digital space. I believe that everyone can succeed if we learn from each other. That's why I'm here bringing ideas and information that can help you navigate the noisy digital marketing space. Hi, and welcome to the Social Small Talk. As usual, I am overly excited, but today I'm excited on so many different levels. I have Jamaliya Cobine here from Ursa Major, and she is unbelievable. Her background is in fashion, and I just love what she's done in marketing and hearing just from another expert about how to really get by in this crazy, crazy world of digital marketing and how we always change. So Jamaliya, can I have you just introduce yourself a bit, tell everyone a bit about yourself and where you've come from and maybe even more about your background?
Yes. Hi, Audra, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today. Yeah, so my background, I'm originally from Indiana, and I actually went to school for apparel merchandising at Indiana University. And I've really been interested in working in retail and fashion and, the sort of the wider brand space really since my college days. And so I was really fortunate to be able to work with an amazing company right out of school, which is Urban Outfitters. And they're actually based in Philadelphia. So I moved from Indiana to Philadelphia when I was fresh out of school. And I ended up working with Urban Outfitters for about 9 years. It was an amazing place to grow up. And really, I do feel like I kind of grew up at Urban Outfitters. And, it was one of those experiences where it's such an entrepreneurial company and such a creative company that you could really kind of forge your own path. And that was right up my alley, especially when I was younger. And, like I said, I worked with them for almost 9 years in Philadelphia. And then I had an amazing opportunity to move into kind of my next step in my career and oversee a e-commerce business for an outdoor and action sports company called Burton Snowboards. So if any, skiers and snowboarders are out there, I'm sure they know who they are. And it's an amazing company, again, with just an amazing brand and company culture. So I moved up to Vermont for that role, and I spent quite a few years in Vermont working with them. And after that, I packed my bags. I moved to London for a few years and worked with the global fashion retailer Topshop, overseeing customer experience and their digital business for Topshop and Topman. And that was just an awesome and, sort of mind-blowing opportunity to be able to experience a new country and a new company and, kind of continue my career on that scale. And then I returned to Vermont after a few years in the UK, and I landed with a really wonderful, sustainable, clean skincare company called Ursa Major. And we are based here in Vermont, and I'm loving life with them. It was a really amazing experience to be able to join the team because, the company is just one of those companies whose values really align with mine, and I think they just have an amazing trajectory. So that's where I am today.
Well, I love it. I am a fan of obviously pretty much everything you've done, not going to lie. I am a crazy snowboarder, in case people don't know that. So Burton is my choice brand, no matter what, as much as
naturally.
I mean, it's hard not to. And the funny part is all of those brands have just, their digital marketing has just exceeded what I think a lot of people have expected necessarily from them. I'd love to know a bit about what made you get into digital marketing in the first place. Was it just the love of connecting? What was it?
That's a great question. I would say I never have ever really considered myself a marketer, as funny as that sounds. I've been helping businesses sell things since I was 15 years old, working behind a retail counter. But my background really started out in retail and specifically e-commerce. And, obviously that is really part of that symbiotic relationship with digital marketing. And I was, fortunate enough to be able to work in really all facets of that business, from website production to online merchandising, site optimization, project management, technology integrations. And in terms of digital and really what got, me there is my love and I think understanding of the fact that buying something and that experience of connecting with a brand or a company and committing to a purchase with them is actually a pretty emotional experience. And it's a connection that people make with some companies for a lifetime. And I've always really gravitated to that space because that customer journey can be so powerful. That said, I think the pace at which digital changes and is constantly evolving is probably what really appeals to my personality, like at the core of me. So ultimately, I think that's probably what keeps me here.
I love that you said that. I'm the same way. People ask, like, why did I get into it? I love the change. I'm very similar to you where I need constant change. I move a little too often. I seem to be the person that's like, I just need something different in my life, whether it's a haircut, color, job, stuff in that regard. So it's funny to hear that. But you said something perfectly, which is I think a lot of people don't realize is a lot of marketers don't tend to think they're marketers because they look at things in a salesy way. And what I wish people could understand more of is that sales and marketing actually are an integration. They are side by side. They are not two different entities because without one, you don't have the other and vice versa. And what I love hearing from you is just that customer relation part and really adapting to that. What we really need to look at as marketers and seeing the change, especially in digital marketing, is our metrics should be looked at in a sales way too. So when people say, oh, I'm in sales, I don't deal with marketing, or I'm in marketing, I don't deal with sales. We need to get out of that mentality and realize that they have to coexist together. And I love that you pointed that out perfectly in the way
Yeah, absolutely. And, you think about that marketing funnel and it's sort of cheesy, like we all know the marketing funnel, but really, half that journey is what happens on a site or in a retail store. And the other half of that journey is the experience the customer has when they're not with you and how you bring them back to you or how you introduce yourself to them in the first place. And I think it's so important to have like every step of the way kind of ticking together and really kind of working in unison. Otherwise, you could have amazing, well optimized digital marketing campaigns that are driving massive amounts of traffic and then just fall down on the other end or vice versa.
Exactly. And that goes to so many different things. I think a lot of people go, well, social media doesn't work for me because I have people going to my website, but it's not converting. And there's a lot to that. And we could talk about that a little bit later on. But for us, when we see that, there's a lot of things going on. And digital marketing isn't just one entity, right? Same thing with sales. It's not just one. There's a whole entire funnel. Like you said, the fun marketing funnel we all hear about. Same thing with the sales funnel. That goes on that we really need to look at different parts of the cycle to make sure that the customer is going through the right funnel, the right channel, where you want them to, what you want them to hear from. And what's funny is, as you talked about your past and going into Ursa and everything in that regard, digital marketing has just changed a lot in all industries, specifically a lot in the beauty and the fashion industries. Over the time, what are 3 suggestions you would give beauty brands or just brands in general about digital marketing that you've seen?
Yeah, that's key. And I think some of these might sound like, oh, this is like simple. This is the straightforward stuff. But I actually feel like a lot of times those are the things that get overlooked a little bit. So, for me, obviously, is just really having an intimate and deep understanding of like what your USP or that, point of difference, your unique selling proposition is. And, ensuring that you're communicating that clearly via all your marketing channels. And that's so much easier said than done. So it's almost like you want to like plaster that up on the walls in your meeting rooms so that you can really check back in and make sure that the campaigns that you're creating, the creative that you're putting out into the world, the copy that you're writing and kind of speaking to your customers through, making sure that connects back to really why they should purchase with you and ultimately why they should be a fan of your brand or follow you on social media or, whatever your goals are. Another one, for me, and this has always been kind of a key thread throughout my career, probably because I've always worked for brands, is striking that balance between brand and then that product and promotional marketing space. And really having a strategy as to how you split those things, both from a spend perspective, but also from, a targeting perspective. Who do you need to speak to about your brand? And at what points in their journey do you need to either introduce your brand to them or remind them of, that emotional connection to the brand? And, ultimately, I think some companies, because you're trying to hit sort of month-end targets or a year-end sales goal, you'll swing super heavy and just sort of start firing up sales and promotions, and your entire social media presence might just be product ad after product ad. And I really think, unless that's your proposition and you are just a sales, like on sale all the time, fire sale kind of brand, and more power to you if that's what you're doing. But if that's not who you are, I think that can just be so degrading. So making sure that balance is there and that you don't kind of throw your brand out the window, so to speak, even if you're really under the gun or under pressure from a financial perspective to meet a goal or a number. And the last one, I would say is always keep testing and learning and iterating. And this is actually something that comes from, really my e-commerce background. You're successful in like software development and technology development and website optimization when you test and learn. And I think 100% the digital marketing space has adopted this as well. And it is really just like key pillar of the digital space in general. And, sometimes you might not have a massive budget and it's really challenging to do this. So just be really targeted about the tests that you're running and make sure that you have a clear sense for what you want to learn or what specifically you're trying to test for. Is it creative? Is it copy? Is it audience? And, make sure that you're really noting those wins and building off of them rather than kind of trying to reinvent the wheel every time.
You touched on so many points for me that as I sit here, I think testing is so, so big, right? I think a lot of people, especially brands, when they're starting out or even as they're growing, they want to see that ROI so quickly. And things aren't an overnight success. I've said this before, and I think I'll probably constantly say this. The people that all of a sudden come out, or the brands that come out of the woodworks, have been working very hard for a long time. It's not that the day before they decided to press a button and go, we're going to spend a lot of money and everyone's going to know about us. They've tested, they've looked at their target market. I think really especially when you're saying this stuff, is you really, really need to know who your customer is as you get into digital marketing, on social, on advertising, on everything. If you don't, testing becomes harder, right? Because you're ultimately kind of throwing your money at a wall and hoping it sticks rather than really analytically looking and going, I know that my customer shops at Neiman Marcus or is an avid snowboarder that goes to Colorado in the mountains or in Vermont in the mountains, and they know exactly where they shop, what they do, who they hang out with, and they have that clear success story behind them rather than sitting there going, I don't know that yet. And what I would love to pinpoint there is just telling people out there, know your customer base before you just automatically put money behind it. And sometimes we do have to test, and sometimes we think we know who our customers are, and ultimately maybe that changes over time, and that's fine. But if you haven't figured out who you're actually marketing to, it becomes very challenging to advertise to them as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, for smaller brands or kind of up and coming companies, a lot of the big guys are really using data science to power a lot of those insights now. And so, if you don't have an opinion or you don't have, a roadmap that gets you to really understanding your customers, you're going to be that many more steps behind some of the, the behemoth companies out there. But I think there are a lot of accessible options to dig into that. It's just making it a priority within your company. And, the customer, like the old saying of like, the customer is always right. I think now the saying in digital is really customer first and thinking about that customer first mentality. Because if they're at the sort of epicenter of everything you do, the likelihood that you're going to kind of get off track or go wrong is so much lower.
And with that customer first, the customers are smarter these days. They see through fakeness. They see through a lot of stuff. And social has really brought that to light, because if your product doesn't do well, or if it's not for the right person, they will call you out on it. So really knowing that customer helps that part too, rather than getting that negativity surrounded by the products or brand or anything like that. Now, that's going to happen as you grow no matter what, but really ultimately understanding how to avoid it is even better.
Yeah, exactly.
As we talk about that, and I hit on it before, which is a lot of companies, with the overnight successes, which don't happen, but a lot of people want to see that clear ROI, especially when they're talking about digital marketing, social media marketing, advertising costs. How would you explain the importance of marketing, even if a clear ROI is hard to show?
I think that's, probably on the minds of so many marketers right now at this very second. And frankly, I've been on both ends of that conversation. I've been the person storming in saying, like, why are we doing this? You can't prove to me that this is actually, benefiting us or making us any money. On the flip side of that, I've been the one storming in saying, we absolutely have to do this. I know that it's a leap of faith, but this is the right thing to do. And all of the indicators are telling us that this is, where we need to be, or a campaign we need to run. And, I think showing an ROI is absolutely important, but probably before that, even stepping back, is first setting what those goals are. So, making sure that you have a really clear agreement amongst, whether it's, a sole proprietor, an entrepreneur, really understanding what you're trying to get out of something, or if you're in a larger company, having that agreement with your leadership around, what are the goals of this? And sometimes I think it's really important to set goals that are a little bit softer in terms of, reach and brand awareness. And frankly, anyone that's still on a last click attribution model, you ultimately don't know how many of those touch points have really contributed to that sale. So while I don't like to sort of throw out, all of the kind of key digital marketing KPIs that we all look at on a daily basis, like cost per acquisition and ROAS, I do think it's important to also understand that your customer is going to experience you in a lot of different touch points, and all of those things are going to contribute to whether or not they're going to purchase with you, and especially whether or not they're going to be a loyal customer to you in the long term. And I think that brand piece and making sure that, you're setting some strategic goals around company awareness, product awareness, brand awareness, and then, kind of coming in to seal the deal with whether it's retargeting ads or, Google Shopping ads or something like that is really important, and having it kind of bookend it. And I think if you set clear strategic goals for something and you really have buy-in and agreement with what the KPIs are up front, I think you have a lot more success getting a few things in the door that maybe are just, purely about reach and engagement, or, purely about, running a longer term brand campaign, and we're actually going to measure brand sentiment over a 6-month or a 12-month period, rather than purely just looking at, ROAS on a week in, week out basis. But I do think you have to kind of get that agreement up front, because it can be a hard sell. Spending money and not seeing the dollars just come right back to you is always going to be a tough conversation, but I would encourage people not to avoid it. It's a worthwhile one to have if you're building a brand.
It's funny because you say that, and I've had so many conversations of how to show ROI, and it goes back to, if any of us have ever bought a house, realtors are the perfect example of this, which is nothing to do with the beauty industry except for their client acquisition part of it. And they always say that you need 7 to 10 touch points before someone will actually buy a house from you. And I ultimately think that's any sales, right? And most people know that. But when we're talking about that, social is just one. Every time they see you, it's just another time that your brand recognition is happening, and wondering why they should buy from you, or what brands you are, or what is your story, why should they care about what your cause is. And the funny part about that is knowing your goals is so important. And at our company, what we like to do is go over not only quarterly goals, but yearly, like what's Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, what's your ultimate end of year goal, what's your 5-year goal? Because when you backtrack and figure out that, then you can be able to track what metric you're looking for. We all know revenue is a big one, but do you want your brand to be more recognized? Because that's very important for revenue to then go up, right? We always need to be able to correlate a lot of other things together, because sometimes sales takes time, but when you start to actually see people caring about your brand or talking about it, shouting it on a rooftop, that's when you know you're doing something right. So when we're talking about showing ROI, there are so many different ways to clearly show it, but it might not always be in that revenue stream. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And I love your analogy around, a realtor and kind of purchasing a home. I think that even rings true if you think about the investment that you're making in that home. Ultimately, you might double your investment in 10 years. There could be, knock on wood, a recession, and then it's, you're in the red. You really don't know. And so I think in anything you do, there's a little bit of that leap of faith, but so many of those touch points ultimately contribute to what is usually a pretty safe bet. And, really investing in your brand is, I think, at the core of the companies that we see today who are really successful. They're not just like beating people over the head with a retargeting ad with a product in it.
Exactly. Or just always doing sales. It's really about their story. I mean, consumers now care more about the face behind the company than the product. And I know that sounds counterintuitive in a couple of ways, and that's such a marketer's point of view. But if my friend was to tell me a story about, like, let's say Ursa Major, right? And how amazing it made them feel and a little bit about the owner, I'd be more willing to buy that than just seeing pictures of, obviously, the product, right? We want to hear about the story of why an owner created this product line, what the background was. We're all about heartstrings now. In 2020, consumers care more about people than about everything else. And obviously they care about ingredients and everything that comes into the environment and stuff in that regards. But we really want to know what our friends and friends and friends and friends of friends use, because that's what we want to do. That's why influencer marketing became so big too, which is a whole different conversation. But there's so much to that when you talk about really creating, obviously, your goals and ultimately how many touch points you should have and stuff like that. And I love that you touched on that. It makes me happy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Audra Brim here, taking a quick break. Thanks again for listening. I just wanted to let you know about the offer Brim Media has put together called the 6-Month Strategy to Grow Your Business. This is your chance to have a tailor-made 6-month strategy to grow your business online. Think of us as your digital partner. We work with you to create a cost-effective success plan for your social media and digital marketing efforts. To learn more, go to www.brimmedia.com/6-month-custom-plan. I can't wait to hear from you, and we look forward to working together. As we go into more about social media, obviously, like you said, with the retargeting ads and so many people push sales onto consumers, but can you think back as to what mistakes you've done on social media that maybe you wish you never did?
Yeah, I think that's, a pointed question. None of us like to look back, but I think it is so important because you kind of learn from that. And you can always sort of have that as a baseline of where you can go. I think for me, and actually it's a little back to this point around product and promotional sales. I've been in businesses where we've really let it swing too far, really let that pendulum swing too far, either to the product and promotional side or to the brand creative and that more brand marketing side. And, in both of the scenarios where, that's happened, I think you start to lose engagement with people and, not your full base, right? But you start to alienate some of your base. And I think people really lose interest because you're showing them too much of the same thing and you're really appealing to something that is maybe more of a niche part of your group. And I think anyone that has sort of a CRM system or something along those lines where they can kind of segment their customers and see, different customers have different needs from you. You're going to have people that are sales shoppers that only ever show up when you send them an email about, your Black Friday sale. You're going to have people that really respond to sort of your storytelling and your brand creative. And both of those customers have value to a company and to a brand, and they just behave differently and they have different needs and they might, sort of have different economic positioning. And so I think it's, as long as you're staying true to what your brand voice is not alienating kind of one group or the other by swinging too heavy-handedly, one to sort of one side of the pendulum or the other. Because when I've done that, I think it's just never been beneficial to sort of growing organically or, really being able to sort of target different groups and segment. It really just narrows your scope so much.
Love that. I love that so much. Every marketer, even brands in general, we never like to look back at what we've done wrong, but it's always such a learning lesson. And ultimately, what we try to do at the Social Small Talk is really teach people, right, how to not create the same mistakes as us. So I appreciate you looking back. It makes me even happier because I feel like we're doing a good justice to other people. But in the same aspect, when we're looking at like the highlights of careers or really good metrics, what metrics do you look at to make sure social media is working for you? And I know this goes back to really the strategic goals of it, but when you're looking at whether it's an advertisement or an organic post, what are you looking at?
Yeah, I think that is, that's key because that's what we're kind of in, day out. And, from a paid social perspective, I think it's really important not to only focus on ROAS. I think ROAS is a great sort of benchmark and a temperature check, but similar to, conversion on a website and the swings that you can see there when your sessions grow or shrink, I think it's really important to sort of understand all of the things that are influencing that return on ad spend. So, for me, obviously, it's looking at how creative is performing from a paid perspective. Are you getting the click-throughs? Is your audience right from an effectiveness perspective for the creative that you're displaying? That comes from that test and learn. You can kind of piece that apart there. And I think, also in terms of conversion, like, all right, if you're getting them to click through, but it's not converting, what about that customer journey isn't ticking or isn't really resonating with the customer? So you really have to look at sort of the full suite. Another really important one, and this is, I think, I'm sure on the minds of many people, particularly with the high cost on the Facebook platform, but your cost per acquisition in terms of prospecting and bringing new customers into the brand, and really looking at how that balances out with what your long-term goals are for your customers and what you're really knowing what you're really willing to spend to bring someone new into the brand, but also then looking at what that lifetime value of that customer is and what those next touch points are, so that you can make sure that you're bringing them back for that second purchase or keeping them engaged. From an organic perspective, I do think that I love just that like basic temperature check of like, all right, are followers growing? What does the engagement look like with our posts in terms of like, are they being surfaced? I think everyone sort of felt the pain, for example, on Instagram in terms of like, all right, that post didn't get a lot of interaction and likes, and therefore, my customer base probably isn't ever going to see it because it's never going to get surfaced in our feeds. So it could be the most amazing, like well-crafted post, and no one's even going to get the chance to see it. So I think it's really key to look at the impressions and the engagement there, and really try different things and make sure that you're maybe not going so far that you're not true to your brand, but that you're always sort of tweaking things and trying new things to see what resonates with your customers, and make sure that you're actually surfacing your amazing content. Because when you're not paying for it, that's the best of both worlds, right? If people are seeing it, but you are still sort of speaking into, your existing group. So I think all of those have to be ticking. And then, you really have to look at sort of every metric involved to make sure that they're all sort of healthy and balanced and know what your goals are.
I keep saying this, but you keep touching on like every point I want everyone to hear about. The lifetime, I'm just going back to what you said beforehand, which is the lifetime value of a consumer when they come in is extremely important. And I think from at least my perspective of speaking to so many different brands, a lot of brands don't do this. They look at, oh, this one person came in, this was our cost per acquisition, cost per click, and they see them come in and they go, okay, good for them. But they don't look at, okay, how can we keep them in our sales cycle and ultimately get them off? And clearly I'm a social media marketer. That's not a shock to anybody. But what I always tell everyone, and I'm sure Facebook's not going to like me saying this, But if Facebook or Instagram was to shut down tomorrow, and all of your followers were just there, you lost your customer base. So really making sure that that client acquisition goes into whether that's an email marketing campaign or getting them off somehow so that you have a way to touch them off of social media is so important to that lifetime acquisition. And I love that you touched on that because I think we lose that, especially in the beauty industry. We tend to think, oh, we're posting, we're doing retargeted ads, they're just going to keep coming. And ultimately, we have to be doing another form of whether it's email marketing or giveaways or something to get them off of the social media platform to really engage just with your brands as well. So
I totally agree. It's funny. I was when I was actually leaving one of my prior roles and moving on, I had this really great touch base with this amazing, person in the business that I was just connecting with before I kind of headed out the door. And they asked me, all right, if there was one piece of advice you would give me, what is it on, kind of on your last day? Tell me, no holds barred. And I was just like, your customers are gold. And so like, you need to make sure you own that customer and like, their data, they're on file with you, you can communicate directly. And I think your point on, Facebook and shut down tomorrow, what would everyone do? You really have to have that one-to-one and kind of keep them part of your brand and not part of, someone else's company or brand.
exactly. And something better might pop up on their newsfeed tomorrow, right? We all have a certain ingredient in our brands that's different, or our story makes it different, but everyone's getting advertised all the time to jump ship from a favorite brand because people are going after competitors and their customer base and so many other things. So making sure you're continually to touch them in different ways, whether that's offers or emails, not in the obnoxious way either, because I know we all have seen that. I'm sure your email looks the same way as mine, which is I get the emails that just go into my promotions all the time and I don't ever look at them because it's frustrating. I get the same email every day. But it's really making sure you separate yourself branding wise from that. Now, I don't think Facebook or Instagram are going to go down tomorrow, but we do have our fun blips. And this is always my funniest part of what I do, which is the minute Facebook has a down moment, whether it's an hour or something, everyone goes on Twitter to see if Facebook's down. And we've all jumped ship from Twitter at some point, but somehow we always wind up back there to see if it's down. Or you'll always see Facebook or Instagram down as a trending hashtag. And it's always so funny to me because you're just like, wow, we just jump ship right to another. And it's just like brands, right? We jump ship as soon as we see something better or something goes down. So always maintaining that customer acquisition. So jumping over to, obviously we talked about really what mistakes, what metrics we use on social media. What would you say is your biggest success on social media that you wish you could scream out loud to everybody that they could know?
I think that's the question, right? My biggest success has always been the opportunity to really tell a brand story. And I think one of the places where I've found that to be absolutely the most sort of resonating with customers is through Instagram stories. And, I won't speak to any sort of specific campaign that I did in the past, but one of the past retailers that I worked with, that really became, the connection with our customer. And it became the place where we could really speak about our brand. And I think, sure, we would advertise sales and things like that there, but really finding, what interested them and really dialing that in over a long period of time. It's not kind of one campaign and it's not something super flashy, but that is absolutely an incredibly hardworking channel. It is super specific to the medium. And so, you need to make sure that your creative is really tailored to that. And even, adapting how you speak to your customer and the types of topics that you bring up to them are adapted to Instagram stories. And I think for now, that's an area where I really see the most opportunity, both in the paid and the organic space for, sort of beauty brands, fashion brands, people that are kind of in this orbit of selling products that, people have this really emotional attachment to or, are really incorporating into their everyday lives. And frankly, people are currently still incorporating Instagram into their everyday lives. And for a lot of people nowadays, have stories. So that's where I've really seen my biggest success.
I couldn't agree more. I keep telling our clients and everyone at Brim Media that stories in 2020 is the biggest platform. And organic has kind of gone away a bit, but not in a horrible way, but it's just the way of the world, right? We know that. But stories is organic, and people watch it and want to know so much more, whether it's from a brand or personally. People are watching them more and more and more rather than just looking through their feed. I tend to only go on the top bubbles and watch everyone's story because I am nosy and I like to know what's going on in everyone's life. I also want to hear if a really cool thing, like a behind the scenes story from a brand is going on, or what new products may be coming out, or I want to feel like I'm the first person to know. And that goes back to the consumer looking at a story. They want to know the story of the brands, but they want to feel like they are the first person to know about something. And I agree. I think the biggest success for most companies is if they do stories really well this year, they'll be successful rather than trying to focus everywhere else. Well, I loved this conversation probably more than most, sorry to say, but mostly because you and I are just so in sync, and I agree 100% with what you're saying and where you're talking about making sure ROI comes from and sales and marketing. I would love for people to be able to know where they could even find Ursa Major or be able to get a hold of you. Can you give everyone just a little shout out as to how they could get a hold of you later on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I definitely want everyone to be able to find Ursa Major as well. And we sell through some amazing specialty beauty retailers that are in the clean beauty space, like Soleil and Credo. We're also on Amazon for all of you, people that really need it fast and convenient. My favorite place is ursamajorvt.com, and we do some great perks for new customers, and we have an awesome discount for long-term subscribers there. So check that out. If you want to see little old me, I am at Jamaliya, Jamaliya, and that's on Instagram. And of course, you can find me on, the old beast LinkedIn under Jamaliya Cobine.
Well, Jamaliya, I greatly appreciate you coming on and talking to us, whether it's about your past or what's going on at Ursa Major. It's been my delight to have you on the show, so thank you so much, and I can't wait for everyone to hear this and really implement so many things that you talked about.
Thank you, Audra. It was wonderful speaking with you today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to The Social Small Talk. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please visit our website at brimmedia.com for more show notes and additional episodes. If you have time, please subscribe to the podcast and consider rating and reviewing the show. It always helps other people find us. By the way, I love hearing from listeners. So send me an email at audra@brimmedia.com with your feedback. And if you send me a question, maybe I'll read it on the show. Don't worry, it'll be anonymous.